Well, welcome to the Women's March Canada podcast, making the equality of women in Canada the new norm. This is episode 53, titled Apiecalypse. How do I say that, Jennifer?
Apiecalypse.
Apiecalypse.
Like apocalypse, but with pie.
Oh, I totally get it. I just want to make sure I'm nailing it. Against injustice. My name is Melissa Durrell, and I'm your host. Women's March Canada inspires, unites, and leads the charge for the advancement of women across Canada. Our guest this week, as you just heard, is Jennifer Bundock. And Jennifer, you are quite the character. I'm going to give your bio here because it's pretty awesome. Jennifer, in her own words, is the mother of pies, first of her name, rightful queen of the vegan junk food in Toronto, and resident gluten goddess of the GTA. Fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
Owner and founder of vegan pizza joint, Apiecalypse Now, and vegan bakery, Shortery Mixed Shortbread, and Food Bar Toronto. She has a master's in environmental studies, environmental identity, food security, and food movement from the University of Waterloo. So you're from Waterloo.
I'm actually from Toronto. I just did my graduate degree out in Waterloo.
Ah, very cool. That's where we're recording here from. So amazing.
Oh, cool.
Now, let's get right into it because your Instagram video was one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you today. You recorded it, I believe, middle of the summer. Yes?
Yeah, it was July 13th.
Amazing. And
Friday the 13th.
Ironic, isn't it? And it went viral. 1.4 million views, I believe, 28,000 shares. It's been shared on platforms such as CTV News, now Toronto Magazine, just to name a few. Yeah, let's talk about this. I mean, tell me about the process leading up to this video, and welcome to our podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I was on my way to our East End location, and I got a call from the manager of my West End location, which is where the protesters were. And she basically said to me that anti-choice people were setting up out in front of the restaurant, and that they had graphic signs. And I was completely gobsmacked. I was like, in front of my restaurant? And she was like, well, I don't know what we should do about it, but it's visibly upsetting our customers. And I just U-turned and was like, I'm coming back and I'm going to deal with it. Like, we're not dealing with this. It's not happening.
Right.
I've done a lot of work around reproductive justice, like through university. So I used to be really well known with the people who did those kind of protests in Toronto, who were from Toronto, because I would counter protest them frequently. I lived about 2 blocks from the Cabbagetown Women's Clinic for a number of years.
I know.
And
wow.
so I used to, on my way past, if I ever saw anybody protesting there, then I would just stand there and I would yell at them until they went away. I used to actually keep a bullhorn in my car in case I encountered people on the way. So it had been a couple of years since I had actually even seen protesters with signs like that, because they just never were anywhere that I went. And with the shop, like I was just not encountering them because I was only kind of going to and from work and home, and they don't tend to go into the downtown core so much. So this was like a surprise. And as I was heading back, I started noticing that there were actually a lot of them out that day, and they were doing all the subway stops along Bloor Street.
Okay.
And we're at a subway stop
on
Bloor Street. So that's why they had picked that location. It had nothing to do with our shop or anything like that. It was just really bad coincidence for them. And so because I've done a lot of work with this group of people, I know how litigious they can be. A friend of mine got charged with assault 3 or 4 years ago on Harvard Street, actually, like just a block from my shop. There's a high school there, and they had set up with their signs and banners in front of the high school, and he came out of his coffee shop that he owns and threw coffee all over the signs. And they charged him with assault, and he was in the news and all this stuff. Yeah, because he threw coffee, and they claimed that the coffee was hot coffee and that they could have been burned and all this stuff. So destruction of property. So he got a mischief charge and an assault charge from that. So I know how litigious they can be, and that they're waiting for anything at all that they can latch onto. but because of years of doing animal rights protesting myself, I know exactly where all of the boundaries are.
Yeah.
Because we had to stay within them, and we also would try to, obviously the same way that they do, get somebody to make a mistake. So I know exactly what it is that they could call the police on me for. I know exactly where all the boundaries and the lines are. So it makes me extremely difficult for them to deal with, because they're never going to get me on doing something that's illegal. I'm never going to assault them. I don't threaten them. I don't even say anything personal about the individuals who are standing there, because I don't want to be uttering threats or slander or libel or any of those things. I don't touch the signs. I never leave the sidewalk. I don't impede their ability to walk past me. I don't attempt to block their signs or messaging. I just try to make them as uncomfortable as they're making everyone else, so that they decide to leave of their own accord. Because if they don't leave, then they're going to have to continue to deal with me. And if I can make
that was very obvious in your video, I gotta tell you, Jennifer. I was listening to it with my headphones on, and I actually had to take them off. I was like, I just, this needs to have full amplification.
Yeah, and so and that's the whole point, is the point is to make it a really uncomfortable and hostile environment for them to continue to be in. I can't force anybody not to exercise their right to free speech, but I can definitely make it so that they are less, I guess, what I always say is that they have a right to say and feel whatever they want on public property, but so do I. And so if they're going to stand there and say what they think, then I'm going to stand there and say what I think right back. And I don't really buy into the whole respectability politics thing. I don't think that I have to stand there and give any kind of legitimacy to their argument by debating it as though there's any merit to it whatsoever, which is why I continue to say to them, I don't care what you have to say. No, I don't want your literature. No, I don't want to talk to you about it. I want you to go, and I'm going to just stand here and just wall of sound yell at you until you leave, because I know that they're trying to elicit a strong response in order to coax out that debate. And they want to get through their talking points, and they want the people around to see them as martyrs and as, polite, well-dressed, good-looking young people who are being, persecuted for their beliefs, and that it feeds into their recruitment narrative of, being standing up against something for something. And I really like to disrupt that by essentially just saying no, I'm not going to be polite, and I don't want to listen to you, and I'm not interested in your points. I'm interested in you leaving.
Why are you so passionate about this, Jennifer? Why? I mean, you could easily just walk past, and you've obviously, this has been a years for you.
Sorry, my dogs are just started barking at the mailman.
Okay. But you had a bullhorn in your car. So this isn't something you've been doing for a long time. Why do you feel that, part of who you are means standing up to pro-life protesters?
I think for me, I think it's just really disingenuous. I feel as though it's about control more than it's actually about what they claim to be trying to stop, because they don't see them actively participating in making the things that they believe easier for people to adopt. So for example, I'm vegan, and I would love for other people to be vegan. But I don't just tell people to go vegan and stand on the street corner with, graphic photos of animal slaughter all day, and then hope that enough people will be grossed out or guilted into changing the way that they eat. I created a vegan restaurant that has affordable vegan food that anybody in any financial bracket can access. I do talks about why I went vegan, and I try to make veganism accessible and try to reach out to other people who are trying to go vegan and support them in cutting down their animal products. I donate to rescue organizations that rescue farmed animals from, terrible conditions. I adopt as many animals as I can personally to look after myself. Like, I feel like if you're going to be ideologically opposed to something, that you have a duty to do everything that you can to make that into an accessible option for people. And I think that trying to just end run around it and stack the legislature with single issue people who are trying to just make it illegal for somebody to access something, I think that it's lazy, and I think it's disingenuous, and I don't think it actually addresses the problem, because it's not making abortion illegal, it's making safe abortion illegal.
Right.
And if they really were concerned about death, they would be concerned about all the people who are suddenly going to now be experiencing maternal death, or who are going to be attempting to do their own abortions, or who are going to be using things like pills or alcohol to try to force a miscarriage. And then the situations where they try to do that and it botches, but then the child that they produce ends up being disabled or having lifelong problems because of that attempt early on. I think that it will rise things like, you know, babies being dumped at fire stations, and, you know, children being thrown in the garbage, which we see in states in the United States where they can't get access to abortion. I think that it closes off a really big conversation about just like body autonomy in general. I think that it teaches women and people with uteruses that the potential that they have to make, say, a male life is more important than their actual lived female life, or womanly life, or trans person with a uterus life. I think that it values the potential human more than it values the existing human, and I think that that is really dangerous. I think it's a dangerous path to start any sort of conversation about valuation of persons and who is worthy of saving. And
did you watch the Kavanaugh?
Yeah, I did.
And there was this great moment where one of the senators asked, you know, how many laws are there around men's bodies or men's, and there isn't any. And you know, it's, and I mean, I know that that's America and we're in Canada, but I thought that that was such a poignant point, because I never actually really looked at it that way before. And so I do believe, like, I mean, obviously as feminists, we believe in our right to choose, just point blank and simple. But you know, I wanted to go back to that point that you made around, and I do still want to talk to you more about the protest, because I know I saw there's, you know, people liking and sharing, and I want to get back into that. But to me, one of the really interesting things around this debate is it tends to be a feminist versus anti-feminist. And do you feel that? And if we're ever going to get to the point where you know, like, what is that Malcolm Gladwell tipping point where we're not having these discussions anymore, in your opinion? I mean, you're eyes deep into this.
Yeah, I think that it's complicated. I think there was a time I thought that it was sort of feminist versus anti-feminist, but I feel like so many words and phrases are being sort of co-opted and manipulated. Like, I've even seen feminist arguments written from the perspective of being anti-choice and saying, like, you know, that it's, you know, it's female fetuses that are aborted most often, and like citing things like stuff out of China, and saying, you know, like that it strongly favors, you know, male children. And so I think that there is, to me, it's not really about ideology. It's not about, do you believe that women or people with uteruses are capable of making decisions about their own bodies without somebody intervening to help them decide or tell them what is right or not right. I think that it's more centered around controlling the means of reproduction, and it's about ensuring that individuals who have the power to bring life into the world are kept at a place where the people who don't have that ability exercise their control over those functions. I think that it's a lot of it, because I got a lot of backlash for this as well, a lot of it is steeped in misogyny, and it really has no reason to be. If you were just plainly discussing, at what point does somebody become a person, and at what point does consciousness exist, and at what point is it acceptable or not acceptable for something to live and die, it would be a much more nuanced conversation about the point with which, a fetal development timeline crosses over into being sentient. It would include things like sentient animals. It would include things like really nuanced conversations about, what constitutes life. And it would include things like euthanasia, and it would include things like elder care, and it would include things like dementia. But the conversation itself isn't nuanced. It's so narrow, and it's so laser focused on abortion, and their definition of abortion is so broad. It's literally everything from Plan B, morning after pills, some of them even all the way out to condoms and contraception, all the way through to late term abortions, which they love to talk about. And they talk about late term abortions from a position of having absolutely no understanding of the conditions for a late term abortion. And I feel like it doesn't really have to do with women and being pro or anti women. I think that it has a lot to do with this being sort of ground zero for a conversation about power and power structures within our society. And I think a lot of it comes from people wanting to preserve a nuclear family, or wanting to preserve, say, Christian values in the home, or wanting to preserve women out of the workplace, because women who are raising children cannot participate in the workplace the same way. Trans people who are pregnant, like a trans man who's pregnant, requires a lot more social conversation than I think many of these people are willing to go into. I think that they want to try to keep everybody in pretty narrow categories. And I think that this is a front for keeping society from moving forward, and for keeping women and femmes and trans people and everybody who has a uterus from getting too much power. Because pregnant people have to take time off work, and pregnant people need to see doctors, and pregnant people in the United States rack up medical bills, and pregnant people go through emotional changes, and pregnant people need other people to support and help them. And I think that if you're the kind of person who is in the business of offering support and help in exchange for something, that you want to keep people pregnant. Secondarily to that, I think that they want people to have babies and bring them to term because they want to adopt them. They want to adopt them into evangelical homes. They want to raise them to be, an army of people who are ideologically going to support the things that they support. They're trying to outbreed and outvote already. And when we look at situations like even in the United States, when they took all of those children and put them in little cages and stuff like that, we saw no babies and we saw no little girls. And it's because those are the two things that evangelical families would like to adopt. They don't want to adopt little boys, and they don't want to adopt anybody who's over the age of 5 or 6. Where were all the little girls? Where were all the babies?
I never even noticed that. I'll have to.
They were at Bethany Christian Services.
No kidding.
Being adopted into American families.
Wow.
Because if they charge the parents with a felony, they can actually confiscate their children.
No kidding.
And say that their parents have been deported as felons.
Yeah.
and they can't reconnect them. And then they give the little girls and they give the babies to people who can raise them now with their own same ideology. It's the same as the 60s scoop.
Mm-hmm.
It's
what a crazy world we're living in right now.
Right. And it's like,
how do we see things?
Which is why I think that it doesn't really have a lot to do with the ideology of feminism versus not feminism. I think it has more to do with continuing a supply of babies into an ideology that is losing ground.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're getting more progressive, and people are talking to each other and becoming more understanding, and they can only have so many children themselves, but they have tremendous resources and they have tremendous money, and they don't spend it to make sure that those children can stay in the homes of the people who are having them. They're not supporting school lunch programs. They're not supporting daycares. They're not supporting single mothers or scholarships or things like that. They're supporting their own internal group, adopting and raising children.
Jennifer, tell me, where are you getting a lot of this information?
I get a lot of this information. I read a lot. Like,
okay.
I'm
you share it on your Instagram and your Twitter, like it's because I mean some of this stuff I'm like I'd love to fact check that. I'm a journalist by nature, so I want to fact check some of this. But it is really interesting, and I'm not. I don't. But I do think.
No, I read more. Immediately when I saw this stuff about, say, the children in the United States that were being taken at the border, I immediately noticed that there weren't any pictures of little girls or babies, despite the fact that they said that they were taking, children as young as 7 or 8 months old. Like, I'm seeing that on the news and on Twitter, but I wasn't seeing that in any of the photos. And so I was like, so they're obviously not putting infants in chain link cages.
Right.
And then I was looking at the pictures of the cages, and it was predominantly boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started researching, where are the babies being kept? Where are infants being kept? I followed the, where are the children hashtag for a while, which led me to Bethany Christian Services. And then I did a whole lot of research on that. And then I found several articles out of the United States talking specifically about Bethany and how Bethany gets $800 or $900 for each child from the government that they take into their care. And then after a couple of months, they move them to foster homes. And then those foster homes apply to adopt them. Wow. And then there was a number of stories about like little girls who had been separated. And then the American families, Christian families who had adopted them, because Bethany only adopts out to evangelical Christian families because they won't adopt to gay couples. They won't adopt to anybody who's not within that same ideological vein. They ended up, I read 2 articles about families who had been taken to court when their children were supposed to be reunited with them. And the parents of those children claimed that those children had been previously abused, and that was why they were going to adopt them, to keep them in the United States.
Wow, you've been lying about it too. Okay, I want to go back to your video that we watched about you, because of course I saw that a lot of people were liking it and sharing it. Does that empower you to continue to do this? And then I also want to hear a little bit about, I know it wasn't all good. I follow the hashtag, obviously Women's March, and there's a lot of pro-life stuff that comes in on that hashtag, because they use it to try to talk to women who are following Women's March and pro-choice and those kind of hashtags. So it's interesting to me that like what was overall, how did it all go down?
Overwhelmingly it was positive. I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages over the first couple of days. What was interesting was that I didn't actually share the video. I filmed it myself because I was concerned, because they were filming me with 2 cameras, and I know that they always film.
I saw that, yeah.
And I didn't want them to be able to, clip the footage and make it seem like all I did was just scream, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you in their faces. So I was like, I want to have my own copy of this. But previously, again, doing animal rights work, I know that sometimes people will slap, say, your phone out of your hand. Because if they wreck your phone, then they wreck your footage. So I decided that I would live stream it so that it would be saved on the cloud, basically going up live. As I did it, because that would protect me. Should something happen to my phone, I would be able to say, no, this is literally a live stream of it happening, unedited, with a counter clock on it. This is what happened. Nobody got touched. Nobody got shoved. Nobody got threatened. So I was filming it on my live stream. One of my followers at the time, I only had like 1,500 followers at the time, they screen grabbed it and then put it on their Facebook, which is this woman named Danielle, who's a wonderful person. So Danielle shared it because she thought that it was awesome. So it actually took more than a week before the Facebook video went viral. And I didn't even realize, like, I didn't even know it had been posted until a bunch of my friends started sending it to me saying, this is you. I watched this on your live stream. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that is. So it was about a week later that it ended up going up and going viral. And by the time I got to it, it had already been shared a couple thousand times when I saw where it had been posted. And I was just like, oh, okay. Because like in the video, I say, you know, what restaurant I own to people on the street who I'm talking to, because they're people from our neighborhood, and I recognize them. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, like I own Apiecalypse now. Like we're not dealing with this. But what you can't really see in the video as well is that a lot of our customers came outside when I started yelling at them, and all of my staff stood in the front door. They were all basically jeering at the protesters, being like, Jen's coming, you better go before she gets here.
You don't want to mess with Jen.
They were just like, oh, you're gonna regret it. And they all literally just stood in the doorway and just watched. And then the people in my kitchen had the live stream open in the kitchen, and everybody stood and watched the live stream from inside too. Because like, yeah, I was just like outside just yelling at these people, because like I didn't want them there, and I didn't want them across the street. We have a Girl Scout office like 4 doors down. We have a public school like really close by. We have 2 daycares, and there's a public park where kids play baseball on the diamond just beyond where that corner is.
And I mean, there's pictures of fetuses. I mean, it's really graphic. Yeah,
so I was just like, this is not going to go well in our neighborhood. Like, I don't really want to put anybody through this. And further to that, like I had 2 friends this year who both lost pregnancies that were very much wanted. One of them had to terminate at more than 8 months because the child that they were going to have wasn't going to make it. And it was the hardest time they've ever gone through. And I told them that if they needed anything, if they needed food, to just come to the store and they could just eat for free, because I was compassionate to that situation. Another person I know lost a pregnancy that was fairly far along, but then didn't actually miscarry and had to use abortion medication in order to give birth to the miscarried fetus. And you know, like that kind of stuff, like as I was saying to them after the video cuts off, when I got to the other corner, I say this to them as well, that you know, I will be long dead before the people that I care about who went through those traumatic, you know, really trying situations are ever faced with those signs, because those signs look like their trauma.
They're triggering. It triggers.
They look like their pain. It's so unfair to people who have miscarried children that were very much wanted to see those signs, because I think that a lot of people don't realize that when you miscarry, you know, whatever is inside must come out. And the people know what that looks like. It
is. There's so many nuances to this conversation, and
so and that was a lot of the people who came in to see me afterwards too, were people who had miscarriages. I had people come in the day after the video really took off. We opened the store to a line around the block that was entirely women and femme presenting people. I had people come and like run up to me on the street and give me flowers while I was standing by my car to leave that day. I had somebody came up to me and said, "Are you Jen?" And I said, "Yes." And they just fell on me and started crying. And, you know, like, I'm still daily getting harassed by the anti-choice people. They send messages and fake reviews to all of my businesses every single day.
Really? Like
Every
fake
day.
Google reviews to your restaurants?
Yeah, fake Facebook reviews, 1 star. They all just say pro-life and proud. They don't even say anything about the restaurant, and Facebook won't remove them. So our star rating is just tanking. Because they just come, they make a new account every day and they leave me, you know, more reviews. And, you know, like we got threats, and we had people from America call and say, you know, that I shouldn't walk to my car at night, that I might get shot, and just like all sorts of really aggressive, like, threats. And even with all of it, I would do it all again exactly the same way. For one of the people who came and told me that that meant something to them,
Right.
I would do it all again, because it's worth it. You know, like, I can bear it. I don't care what they think. I don't care what my star rating is on Facebook. You know, like, it's not important. What's important is the lives of people, and people feeling seen and validated and stood up for. And I feel like I'm in a unique position to do that, because I'm not personally triggered by those images, and I'm not afraid of, you know, some kid from, you know, Uxbridge in slacks named, you know, Craig. Like, I'm just not. I don't care how I come across. I don't care if I swear a lot, you know. And even, you know, my family, you know, they're not big swearers, and a lot of them are, you know, very religious, and all of them were like, nope, you did it exactly right. There were even people who were anti-choice who wrote me to say that they are anti-choice, but that they were ashamed with the way that the people acted coming to our restaurant with those signs and standing in front of our restaurant with those signs, and apologizing on behalf of them, because clearly those signs distress people, and that's not what they're aiming to do. They're like, we're aiming to, you know, make something that we don't like not happen, but we're not trying to traumatize and disrespect people. And so there's a contingency even within their own ranks that don't agree with this. And I feel like I can have a conversation with those people, and I can say, sure, if it's like vegan food for me, it's like, if I don't want animal agriculture to exist, then I feel a responsibility to do everything I can to incentivize people to not participate in the animal agriculture industry. And if somebody doesn't want abortion to exist, well, you know, make it so that people can get contraceptives. Make it so that sex education is more dynamic. Make it so that, you know, individuals have options much earlier on and easier, because nobody walks joyfully into that appointment, and nobody walks joyfully out of it. No, it's not, which is why it's so disgusting when they talk about it in terms of like birth control, like, oh, you know, they just don't care if they get pregnant. Like, I had friends who had abortions and discovered that they had cancerous cells because of their abortions, and are alive today because they had abortions and they noticed that they had early cervical cancer in their 20s.
At the same time, like, they're the extremes on both sides, and unfortunately we're always kind of stuck discussing those very extreme sides, where we really need to sort of be able to have good, deep conversations around it. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Jennifer, you're amazing. How can people find you on social? And shout out your restaurants, because people need to...
Oh, you've frozen. So I'll answer your question even though you're temporarily frozen. Oh, are you back?
I'm back.
Okay, good.
Okay, here we go.
You're
okay,
frozen.
So we're just going to finish off here. Tell us your social channels and how we can find you.
So I am Apiecalypse Jen on Instagram, which is just the name of our business, which is Apiecalypse now. So Apiecalypse, Apiecalypse, Jen, Jen, which is me. I'm Apiecalypse now on Twitter. We don't have a Twitter for the store, so I do tweet from the Apiecalypse now account as my personal account because we've just had that handle for 10 years. And we're on Facebook, Apiecalypse Now Pizza and Snack Bar and Apiecalypse Now Bakery. The bar that I own is called Foo Bar. It's above Apiecalypse Now on our second floor. It's all vegan drinks and it's kind of heavy metal themed. And that's kind of, those are the best places to find me right now. I'm not really active on Facebook, and I currently don't do any kind of blogging, but I do occasionally do like live stuff on Instagram where I talk about different things, like I talked about Brett Kavanaugh and all that kind of stuff back when that was going on. So I do that from time to time. That's pretty much it.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and talking to us today. You are just like a waterfall or a tsunami of amazing information. And just like, I love your passion. I think that it's incredible. And I know that a lot of people feel the same way. Obviously, you had a viral video. And like, just keep on keeping on. Don't let the haters get to you.
I never do.
Like you. Yeah, good call. We need more women like you in Canada right now, just speaking out and with clarity. And so thank you for that.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thanks to everybody who tuned in to listen. We'll also tag that video because it is worth a watch. Your comments are welcomed and encouraged. Please subscribe to our Women's March Canada podcast channel. Our mission across Canada is to stand together in solidarity with our partners and children for the protection of our rights, our safety, our health, and our families, recognizing that our vibrant and diverse communities are the strength of our country. This is the Women's March Canada podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Women's March CDA and our website, womensmarchcanada.com. I'm Melissa Durrell, and I'm wishing you a great day. Thanks. And we